Hey everybody, it's Mike. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so in this video, I want to answer some really good comments and questions. And so we'll just get right into it. I have no idea what I'm going to, I don't know what I'm going to call this video, but I'm sure I'll put some clickbaity title. But let's just go ahead and take a look at the questions here, because I think they're amazing. So bear in mind, if you're new to this channel is designed for non-borderlines who have been or are currently in romantic relationships with people with borderline personality disorder, or undiagnosed or untreated and or whatever. If you are a borderline and you are in therapy and you have loving, healing relationships and you're well on your way to recovery, this channel is not for you. If you are married to a borderline and it's the best relationship you've ever had and things are wonderful, this channel is not for you. This channel is for non-borderlines who are in pain and who are struggling to regain their life and get their power back. And I'm sharing how I did exactly that. I am not a mental health professional. I am sharing my experience based on my personal experience, my observation, my research, and of course my thoughts. And there we go. So take that for what it is. All right, so let me get right to the comments. So there's a comment here by General Locke, who is responding to a video, BPD, NPD, are you an empath or codependent? What is the difference? So I don't remember what I said. I may have responded to this person's comment. Anyway, he says, I like your vids. Apart that some of them are repetitive of older vids. Well, get used to it. That's the way YouTube works. Yet I am trying to move on. I have pointed my thoughts and mind to a new girl, but still I can't stop thinking how it is with, he mentions, I suppose, the borderline's name. I just can't block her from everything. I can't. Now, General Locke isn't being clear on what he means. Now, apparently I said in a live stream to him that he may not understand BPD and that he may not have watched my videos. It is very possible that he has watched all of my videos, but if he is in the throes of BPD codependence, then the thing about codependence is it's one of those things that tells you you don't have it. So it's, imagine a disease that you get. Again, I like to use the example of getting bit by a zombie. Imagine if that part of the symptoms of being bit by a zombie is that the zombie virus keeps telling you that you don't have it. So that's what codependence is. And, I'm very direct about how I challenge people in their codependent denial. It doesn't mean I don't understand. And it doesn't mean that I don't remember how tremendously difficult it was to just become aware that I was in a codependent crisis. And even though I knew that, it still couldn't prevent me from walking away. So it's really important, if you want to recover from being an empath, being enmeshed with a borderline, if you're willing to accept that you're a codependent label on yourself, it's extremely important to understand that the delusion and the addiction and the I forget what they call that word for the confusion is so overwhelming that just knowing that intellectually isn't enough. It's like if you're bit by the zombie virus, it doesn't change the fact that even though it's wrong to be a zombie, you can't help but want to eat people's brains. So just because that you have been watching my videos and you're aware doesn't necessarily mean that that in and of itself is going to inoculate you from your own delusion, because that's part of being an empath, is the delusion on all different ways. But it starts with the beginning of an awareness that, hey, maybe I have been bit by a zombie. So and the other thing that happens very often with codependents is that they deal with a lot of shame. And so their knee-jerk reaction, of course, when I say they, I'm also talking about myself. The knee-jerk reaction is to defend yourself and to say that you do know what's going on and I do have value. It's like, again, imagine you've got the zombie virus and your eyes are turning yellow and there's blood seeping out, from your eyeballs, and somebody says, you don't look well. Instead of going, really, I don't look well? Please tell me what that is so I can heal it. The denial sets in and goes, I can't believe you would victim blame me like that. I was looking at my television screen, or, people are going to defend themselves because they feel they've been personally attacked when somebody's pointing out to them, yeah, there's pus coming out of your ears. So, that's kind of what I'm doing here. I keep the promise to you guys. My promise to you is that I'm going to be straight with you. If you're abusive, I'm going to block you. If you are passive aggressive, I'm going to reflect that passive aggressiveness at you. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. I will get aggressive towards you, but I'm doing it consciously. And if you are in denial, I'm going to point that out to you. And or if you are in need of some education, I'm going to educate you. I have a limited amount of time, so I don't have the option to do what I do in my normal spiritual counseling, and or if you're with a therapist, they actually have these ways of being there with you in your denial and helping you slowly come out of it, so that they don't help you, they don't stimulate your defense mechanisms, your shame. So I don't have time to avoid all that. So I'm going to be direct with you and tell you the truth. And there's a lot of people who are going to respond out of their shame and out of their denial. So don't take it personally. It doesn't mean that I'm actually judging you. It means that I'm really, my job is here to help. I have no agenda on this channel. I'm only here. The only reason I'm here is because people keep telling me that it helps them. When that stops, I'll stop doing videos and I won't think twice about it. But until then, I'm going to keep my promise to you and tell you the truth as I understand it. And if it doesn't work for you, there's plenty of other channels. You won't hurt my feelings if you unsubscribe and go someplace else. All right, so he's trying to move on. So that tells me that he's still in the denial. And no amount of intellectual education is going to make that go away. You really have to, the thing about codependence is that it is a self-diagnosed, for lack of a better word, disorder. It's not a mental disorder. It's something else. It's a psychological response, but it is addictive and it acts like a mental disorder. Somebody in here said something about, saying to me that I should check if I'm a cluster B. Well, the truth is that, I use the zombie virus analogy for that very reason, because when you get in that, based on your unresolved childhood codependent issues, when you get involved with a borderline, it turns you into you're operating from the programming, like there's a software program that gets into your brain that makes you act and think like a cluster B, but you're not, but you think like one. So anyway, I forgot what I was saying, but he says, I'm trying to move on. That tells me that he's not doing anything. I don't have any evidence from his comment that he's in therapy, which is absolutely essential, that he's in CODA, working the 12 steps, which is what I recommend. And without those two things, the likelihood of you being able to work through it and get yourself out of it is virtually impossible in my experience. And based on this, it tells me that he's still trapped in it. Again, imagine being in a relationship with a borderline is, before you meet them, you're in a canoe, and you're paddling down the lake and you're in a canoe and everything's fine. You get involved with a borderline and your canoe flips over. Now you're dumped in the water, you've risen to the surface and you're breathing and you're treading water and your canoe is next to you and it's tipped over. Trying to just wait it out. I'm out of the relationship now. I'm trying to get over it. That's like sitting around waiting for your canoe to flip itself over. It's not going to happen. It's been flipped over. It's probably going to sink unless you figure out a way to get underneath it and flip it over again. Again, if you get bitten by the zombie virus, that zombie virus is going to continue to infect you until you get the vaccine. So, again, it's like getting, flesh-eating bacteria. Sitting around waiting for the flesh-eating bacteria to go away is only going to make it worse. So, general lock, if you're not in therapy and if you're not working the 12 steps, in my experience, waiting around and trying to get over it isn't going to work. I'm glad that people watch my videos, and it's the beginning. That's all I'm here to do, is to crack your head open a little bit so you can go get the help. But if you don't get the help, it's kind of a waste of time. It's going to take however long it takes. So, again, don't take it personally, but he's trying to move on. He says, I've pointed my thoughts and mind to a new girl, but still I can't stop thinking how it is with his ex. So you're just pointing out what I'm trying to say here. You think that you're going to intellectually come over it, but first off, I understand. My first instinct, after losing my fiance, who was the love of my life when she passed away, my first instinct was to go find somebody else, to go find love and have somebody fix me by loving me. So I understand that. Thankfully, that didn't happen. I did end up doing that, which is how I got involved with the borderline. And I'll talk about that later on. But, you're telling us very clearly that your therapy in your mind is the way to get over this is to find somebody else. You're making very clear you've already come to that conclusion. If I can, it's not even like I want to fall in love with somebody because we're really connected. You're just going to go find somebody else. And all that's going to happen when you do that is you're going to transfer. So I would recommend that you look what psychological transference is. You're going to take your feelings for your borderline, which are not true loving feelings, by the way. Your feelings for the borderline are your transference from your parents. So the whole reason you're with the borderline is you're trying to get mommy and daddy to love you. You transferred it over to the borderline, because they're incapable of loving you, that's why it pulled you into it. You've now been rejected by the borderline, which stimulates the original feeling of neglect and rejection you had from your parents. You're taking that same thing and you're pointing this onto this new girl, and that's not fair to her. It's not real love. So, you owe her better than that. I don't have, as I said in my response, I don't care what you do or don't do. I don't have an agenda. But, it's not, and if you were in therapy, if you were in the 12 steps, you would know right off the bat that that is not an effective strategy. So it tells me that, I've said before, you may not understand BPD. I still say that. And I don't think you understand your empathic nature, your codependence. It's pretty clear to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you in therapy? Are you working the 12 steps? If so, what does your sponsor think about that idea? And you can't stop thinking about, you're still in the old relationship. And that's not fair. Why would you want to bring that into a new relationship? Who would want that? Who wants to be with somebody that's constantly thinking of somebody else? And your assumption is that the other person's love will sort of, be an antidote and you'll stop thinking about the other one. But it's not going to be the case. worst case scenario, you might end up leaving this woman and going back to the borderline. The borderline might hear about you because you say you can't block her from everything. I don't know what that means. What do you mean you just can't? You're not telling me. Is it that you can't because it is literally impossible for you to go no contact? Or are you saying I can't because emotionally you can't let go of her? So let me give you another very possible scenario, which you might unconsciously want to happen, is that you will end up with this new person and your borderline ex will hear about it, and that will stimulate her to chase after you and hoover you back. And you'll end up betraying and leaving this poor other person who might be, a codependent herself, and you'll, traumatize her. Because as you say, you can't stop thinking about the other one. So my suggestion to you is get your ass to a therapist and start working the 12 steps, and then then ask like your therapist and your sponsor, should you be in a relationship? And then he goes on to say, as though he knows exactly what I'm thinking, he says, and no, I'm not jumping from one to the next. Well, just saying that you're not jumping from one to the next doesn't change the fact that that is exactly what you're doing, because you say that's what you're doing. You say that I'm trying to move on. And so now you're going to tell us how you're trying to move on. Your strategy is, I have pointed my thoughts and mind to a new girl. So you are, just because you say I'm not jumping from one to the next, you are doing exactly that. I'm not judging it, that's just the facts. Then you give her name and you say, I've known her for years, but now she's separated with her boyfriend just weeks ago. I mean, listen to everything. She's newly out of a relationship. She doesn't know who she is. She is also jumping from one relationship to the other. Both of you are jumping and running away from, I can only assume she was in a dysfunctional relationship also. Because healthy people don't do that. Healthy people, when they get out of relationships, they need time to be alone. And they'll be like, I'm not ready to be with somebody. It takes, for instance, like, marriages and things like that. When you go through big, relationship divorces, my understanding is it takes, sometimes half of the time that you were with them. So if you're married for 5 years, it's going to take a couple of years before you're really ready to get into another relationship. It's not a hard and fast rule, but so you're both doing that. And then you bring this shame and judgment and you say, I'm not that shallow-minded to just go from this to that. And I respond, it's not about being shallow-minded. There's no judgment attached to it. And being a codependent, you're going to be filled with self-judgment. So General Locke, I wish you all the best. I have no ill will. If this relationship turns out to be the thing that gives you the greatest happiness, I'm all for it, and I hope that happens. My observation is that that's probably not going to be the case, because both you guys are jumping from probably she's in a dysfunctional relationship also, and you're jumping into something and trying to use each other as a soft landing spot, when what you should be doing is getting therapy, getting help, and learning how to be within yourself and love yourself first. Needing somebody else to fix you is part of the problem. All right, so let's see. Then there's this really great question. Francesco asks, hey Mike, thanks for taking the time out to help us understand the situation we are in. This is in response to, is there a cure for borderline personality disorder? And to give solutions to our problems. I like how you're blunt and real with the truth. Can I ask you a question which might be stupid to you, but I need to know? Do borderlines forget what you did for them? And I respond to him, that is not a stupid question at all. The reason why it's not a stupid question is because that's an unusual thing. Because people who do not have this particular mental disorder do remember what you do for them, assuming that they're healthy. Of course, not everybody does that. A lot of people do forget. There's all kinds of unkind, destructive people out there. And borderlines aren't the only destructive, narcissistic people in the world. But yes, they do. And this is going to be also in response to another another comment that I'm going to respond to from a borderline, but it's not necessarily that they intellectually forget. They may have an intellectual memory, and there's also just as much a possibility that they might completely forget. It is a fact that with many borderlines, and bear in mind that there is a spectrum, not all borderlines are the same. Not all borderlines have comorbidity of different things, because just because you're borderline, you can also be suffering from CPTSD. You can be suffering from all kinds of other issues, and all of these things. You could be NPD comorbid. You could be antisocial. You could be all kinds of other things. You could have crazy. What I mean by crazy, you could have intense anxiety, social anxiety, depression. You could have all these other things going on at the same time, which in and of themselves, as well as drug use and other kinds of things, there are all kinds of possibilities that can actually create a scenario where borderlines go into phases where they're not conscious of what they're doing. And so in that case, they won't remember. Borderline personality disorder, in my experience, is a trauma response, just like people say. Now, some people want to say it's not a mental illness, it's a trauma response, to which I respond, that is that's the first symptom. The trauma response is the first symptom of the mental illness. Of course, it's a trauma response. That's part of what causes the mental illness. So when somebody's in a trauma response, they're not in the higher realms of their brain matter. And so when you're in that kind of intense survival mode, you don't remember what's going on. If you've ever gone through traumatic experiences, you won't oftentimes remember. Try and talk to somebody who's been in battle. They made it out. They might be a blur. And this is just something that happens. I mean, when you're intensely focused, as a surfer, this is one of the things that happens with me. I love surfing, but when I'm surfing a big wave, because I'm so involved in the moment and involved in what my body is doing, that afterwards I have to struggle to remember, because the part of your brain that's there involved in every single, hyper focused on every single thing that's happening in order to survive that wave, means that you're not going to have a linear memory of every single moment in the wave. And so borderlines, because they are operating from their trauma response, from their PTSD, because of they're operating on the when they're splitting, and when they're love bombing you, they're not completely conscious of what's happening either. So there is a real reality that they're not going to remember, not forget about what you did or didn't do. They're just not going to remember whole chunks of things. The borderline I was with she lost 3 weeks. There were 3 whole weeks she completely lost. And she would say, when we first got together, she wanted to record what we were talking about, because we were planning out our relationship, and she wanted to record it. She wasn't honest with me. She said, we're doing this, it's a spiritual exercise, but looking back on it, she knew that she was going to forget. She knew that she would wake up the next day and not remember, because the intense emotional joy she was feeling was, she would, it was a survival mechanism for her to forget any intense emotion. Love, joy, happiness, excitement, pain, anger, sadness, all of them, she would forget all of them. So there's that aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is, as borderlines have said to me on the channel, have said that when it comes to this, which is what you do for them, meaning the positive things, the love that you give them, because this is the delusion of the codependent, is that if I can just love them enough, that the love will finally get in there and they'll realize that they're safe and that I love you back, and then they'll remember and they'll love you forever. That's a delusion that works with people who aren't borderline. Borderlines, because there is no identity there, and their core essences of shame and self-hatred and I have no value and I don't deserve to live, that there's this empty black hole. And every time that you dump love into them, as somebody says, it's never enough. It just disappears. So the moment that you give them the one thing that would be to somebody else, oh my God, that was the thing that did it for me was when you did this and I realized you were the one. For the borderline, they take it and they consume it and it's like they have no neck. It just falls through their neck. And it never gets to their stomach, so they never feel it. So yes, they do. They forget. And that's part of their survival mechanism that is part of their mental illness is when you truly love them, that's why they split on you. That's why they go from loving you to hating you. That is the whole, I mean, they convince themselves that you are trying to destroy them. That's them erasing all of the good things that you've done. So yes, they only know what they feel in the moment. So absolutely, they never, as you know, one of the things that was most helpful for me in the beginning was I was reading about borderline personality disorder and it just clicked for me because this person said, wrote, borderlines never truly see you. You are just a fuzzy outline of a human being that they project all of their feelings onto. That means all the love that you felt from them was narcissistic projection. I mean, it wasn't because you were anything special. You just happened to be there. And they projected you're the best. That's coming from them. And the worst, when you're the worst, they're projecting that onto you. So the truth is, no matter how long you were the borderline, they really have never seen you anyway. They don't really know anything about you. And depending on how severe their PTSD is and how severe their BPD is, they may not remember you from one day to the next. When I went back, you know, after I got the final discard and I went back to see my borderline to try and get some closure, I truly saw her for who she was because it was really clear she was looking at me and I could tell she didn't know who I was. She had no remembrance of me. She had a vague recollection that we had been together. Outside of that, there was nothing. And, you know, I remember her saying, you know, one time when she was in her regressed state, you know, and I was trying to take care of her, and she was really wanting some irrational thing for me to do to take care of her, and I, you know, I had to get real with her for a moment. I said, listen, you got to stop doing that. We need to figure out, you know, am I taking you to the hospital or am I taking you to here? You know, let's focus. What am I doing? Of course, that didn't work with her because she was in her state, and it just made her even more traumatized. And then when I finally got her back to my place, and I was there and I was taking care of her and I was, you know, kissing her forehead and telling her she was going to be okay, she said, just like a little kid, she said, I thought you were really mean, but now I see you're really good. It just depends on what's happening in any given moment. So of course they forget what you do. They forget everything that you've done. This is why it's just a waste of time to ruminate on why don't they love me, and if I only do it this, that, you know, they don't remember anything based on, you know, the severity of their illness. Let's see, let's keep going. This is a really good one. This is coming from somebody who had the same scenario as me, which is that I got involved with my borderline. What, you know, I should have known better because I've been in 12-step, you know, work for almost 40 years. I've been in therapy for 25 years. I've been doing spiritual work my whole adult life. So I've been in, you know, one of the reasons I was able to recover so quickly was because of all of that. But what got me involved with my borderline was that I lost my fiance, who was the love of my life, who was the fantasy woman who truly saw me and loved me. It was the most amazing, wonderful love experience I've ever had. And unfortunately, I lost her to breast cancer, and devastated me. It was horrible. And so after 2 years of that, I was still looking for her. I still wanted her in my life, understandably. And along came this borderline. And the borderline um, fulfilled that fantasy and molded herself into, because they're very intuitive. And she was able to intuit exactly what I was looking for, and she molded herself into that. That's what pulled me in. The love bombing was what pulled me into it. Looking back, when it happened, consciously, I'm thinking, oh, it's great. I found the love of my life again in this new person, and then, but there was a part of me that kept saying, but something just feels empty about this. Something just isn't right. That's what got me into, that was the trigger that pulled me into it. It wasn't the cause, it was the trigger. So he says, your channel has helped me enormously. You and I share the horrid experience of losing our soulmate. My beloved wife of 18 years passed from a rare form of breast cancer in 2007. I'm still and will forever be dealing with the sadness and PTSD this brought on. Well, I'd like to give you the opportunity to, heal from that. You'll never truly get over the loss, but I'd like for you to give yourself the right to work past the PTSD. You can, but you're going to have to do some work. Again, everybody, if you're not doing these 3 things, I don't have any empathy for you, any sympathy for you. I have empathy, but I don't have sympathy. Get therapy. Work the 12 steps of CODA, CODA.org, and have daily meditation practice. You don't do those 3 things, I can't help you, because you have to do the work. So if you want to heal from it, I would recommend you do those 3 things. My channel is great, but it's not everything. I'm glad people want to go to my channel. Click the join button if you want to learn what I did exactly to get myself in a state of healing. So 3 years of emerging from complicated grief. I met a woman in the UK that I've had a long distance relationship for the last 7 years. Well, there's your first problem right there. What are you doing in a long distance relationship? I don't understand why people do this. Let's be honest. It's a way to fantasize and be lost in the fantasy of a relationship without actually having one. It's a way of stimulating the feelings and projecting and transferring without actually having the intimacy that comes from a real connected relationship. I mean, why even bother? That's my thing. I mean, so, and how can a long distance relationship screw people up? You're acting like you're married to a person that, and I don't know, does that mean that you only text each other? Do you actually see each other? You know what I mean? So right there's a problem. Why even bother? I don't understand that. And according to him, he's been with her for the last 7 years, and she's an undiagnosed BPD. After 3 years of idealization, all those signs were there, it transitioned to 4 years of hell. It's a long distance relationship. I don't get it. Forgive me, but it's just, what I hear is just such fantasy, just such non-existent fantasy. It's clearly your narcissistic experience that you're projecting onto something that's not really there. It's a long distance relationship. We hear this about, women who end up, giving away their fortunes to these guys in Nigeria who pretend to be, other people, and they have these love relationships that are only text. They haven't even met them in person. They see a fake picture, and maybe they might hear somebody's voice, but they'll get text, and they'll give tens of thousands of dollars. There's no relationship there. It's all projection. It's all narcissistic projection. So I don't understand that. I would have far more understanding if you said you guys lived together and you were having sex and you had physical interaction. But this is a long distance relationship. How can a long distance relationship screw you up that badly unless, like you said, you're in so much pain and you have a codependent underlying issue that you're projecting and transferring all of your narcissistic feelings of love onto somebody that isn't really there. So of course they can idealize you because you're not there in front of them. They can idealize you by text or by phone or whatever it is. It's not real. After years of desperately trying to fix the unfixable, You mean the long distance relationship that's not really a close connected relationship? Innumerable breakups and devaluations. I know this has to be the end. I don't know that. You're just maybe in a down spot. Maybe she'll come back to you. I mean, that's the whole scenario of this. I know this has to be the end. I think my desperation in holding on to her has to do with feeling utterly helpless at losing my wife. That is the only real valuable thing you've said here. And that's why it's so really just narcissistic transference. You're transferring your feelings onto this woman. And the reason why you chose a borderline that isn't even close to you, 7 years. I mean, let's just be real. A 7-year long distance relationship. If you said I was in a long distance relationship for 6 months and then we finally got together and I moved out to be with her or vice versa, that's, that to me is a worthwhile long distance relationship. Okay, let's talk on the phone and then let's finally meet and then I'll go move to you, or, otherwise, what's the point? I don't get it. But 7 years of somebody that you don't have, it's clearly pure fantasy. This isn't the Middle Ages. We actually have, ways, except for lockdown, but you were able to do this a long time ago. Go see her. But the real thing that makes sense here is, you're right, is that you are projecting your feelings of your wife onto this person. There's really nothing to say. That's what I did. And when you can become aware that you have chosen a dysfunctional relationship with a woman that cannot love you, forget the fact that she's a borderline, she's long distance, so she can't love you. You chose somebody that can't love you because you're afraid of being hurt again. And this is a way for you to narcissistically, we all do it, I did it, this is a way for you to narcissistically have your feelings of love for your wife without actually having to respond to somebody's love and intimacy, which would change. That's how you would let go. You would let go of your wife by loving a new person in a new way and going through all of the ways of getting to know another person. And then you would have to, in essence, psychologically kill your wife. Because that's what it is. When you finally let go, that's what it feels like. So anyway, I want to come back and I'm going to make some more, I'll continue later, but I actually have to go do some work, and then I want to respond to a really great comment that was left by a borderline, which brings up some good things. So I'll be right back.